right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us for our first monthly webinar presented by SWAT. And this is Teaching Functional Skills Using Augmented Reality, presented by Dr. Shannon Romano. Shannon, when you're ready, you can go ahead and take it away.
Hi, good afternoon. I hope everyone's doing well. I am going to be talking away, but if you have any questions or comments, if you want to contribute in any way, I will absolutely stop to look at the chat. Or if you don't mind interrupting me, is it Charlene?
Shalane, we're close enough.
Shalane, sorry. Shalane, if you don't mind interrupting me, if there's a question that's relevant that I need to address, you can absolutely do that. I don't take those things personally. Okay, so thank you so much. Welcome to Teaching Functional Skills Using Augmented Reality. I am currently a resource specialist and transition coordinator with a local school system in Anniston, Alabama with Calhoun County Schools. This is actually partially a pilot study that I did and also my dissertation research, but to put it in perspective and make it more practical, I know and I'm not going to hit a lot on the researchy side of things, but to make it more practical for you teachers out there, this is definitely an intervention that can be easily adapted to any number of skills for any type of learner. So what we're going to do today is we are going to learn about the benefits and challenges of using augmented reality technology as a method for teaching functional skills. And I also hope that you take away some steps and some general guidelines for how you can implement these sort of interventions in your own practice. All right, so if you are in special education, I don't care if you're working with students in self-contained classes, if you're working with students with learning disabilities, or I would even go as far as to say if you're a parent, you understand the importance of students, young adults, children, understanding and learning functional skills. Functional skills are defined as the skills necessary to live independently and participate within whatever environment the student or the young adult is in. That might be the community, that might be employment. But these adaptive skills are critical for any individual to be successful in life. Typically, they're taught by parents or learned incidentally. If you think about if you have young children, I know my 2-year-old, she is constantly watching me and imitating what I'm doing. A lot of these functional skills are learned incidentally through observation. But students with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities, they require very intensive, direct instruction, repeated practice of skills in order to maintain and generalize those skills. So they need more intensive supports and more explicit instruction for developing these skills. And part of that is really attributed to the characteristics associated with having an intellectual disability. Struggles with generalization, struggles with retaining information and learning new skills are going to serve as barriers for students who are working to learn these functional living skills. There are other factors identified in research for preventing people with intellectual disabilities from developing and retaining functional skills. Environmental factors, if they don't have access to assistive technologies that can promote independence or participation in different environments, that's definitely going to be a huge barrier. And then also living arrangements. For students and for individuals with the most significant disabilities, they might be living in group home or supported environment settings. They might not have access to certain environments or certain activities that would promote development and understanding of functional skills. So all of those things serve as barriers. And of course, it's going to impact an individual across their lifespan, across all environments. It's going to affect their participation in employment, in domestic activities, in developing social relationships, and in participating in any kind of recreation or leisure outside of the home. So there's some pretty significant factors some pretty significant limitations in a person's life that would affect their overall quality of life if they're not able to attain and generalize functional skills. So I'm going to open this up to you guys. You can put it in the chat, but there are numerous evidence-based practices for teaching functional skills. If you're working with students in any capacity, if you don't mind, just drop it in the chat how you're teaching that. Are there certain strategies you're using? Are there specific curriculums or assistive technologies that you're using? I'm going to open up my Zoom so that I can see what you guys are saying. I'm in Alabama, so it's going to look very different if you're in Colorado, for how these skills are addressed in an educational environment. Video modeling, yes, we're going to talk about that. There's some great curriculums for or that use video modeling out there. This is definitely something that I have seen be very effective firsthand, that research shows is very effective. All can see it. Is that a specific curriculum? I'm not familiar if that is a curriculum. I'm not familiar with that curriculum. Aided language stimulation for teaching communication skills on AAC devices. That's huge, using AAC devices to teach functional skills. Who can see this? Yes, video modeling. So that seems to be a widely known and very well researched and established method for teaching functional skills. And that's exactly what we're going to go into next. So talking about video-based instruction, there are different types of video-based instruction, but for the purpose of my own research and for this intervention, I look specifically at video modeling. So if you're familiar with this intervention, there's video modeling of self, where the students or the person that you're working with is the model for how to teach those skills. And there's video modeling of other, where a same age peer or an adult is serving as the model for the video. There's also point of view perspective, where you are recording or the video is showing a demonstration from the perspective of the student. And then there's also video prompting. So this is, like I said, a well-established evidence-based practice for teaching students across multiple domains. We've seen it used in academics, employment, for teaching social communication, also for teaching adaptive and functional skills. There are a lot of advantages for using this. One of my favorite features, I guess, is what I would call it, of using video modeling is that the students can access that video model as many times as they need. So they can get that repetition very easily and kind of control the pace of their own learning. They can view those videos as many times as they need to be independent, or until they become independent with that skill. If you are a teacher, you're probably used to making video models, if this is something you use in your classroom, or maybe you've spent hours searching for video models on the internet. It is a cost and time efficient intervention. A lot of curriculums now are starting to come out with video modeling as a component. I'm thinking of TeachTown for transition specifically is one that I'm most familiar with. It can be accessible on multiple devices. You can play a video model on a television. You can play it on a computer, on an iPad, on a cell phone. But most importantly, and I think why it is so successful and so effective, is that it can be highly individualized. Video modeling can be customized to whatever the student needs, whatever, model, whatever point of view you need to use, you can make it individualized for that student based on that student's needs. All right, so, the premise of this intervention was to look at a well-established research-based intervention, and that's video modeling, and couple it with an emerging technology called augmented reality. I put on here some examples of augmented reality that you're probably already familiar with. I am the queen of QR codes. I love a QR code. I know that's a little bit outdated in the augmented reality world. Some newer examples would be Snapchat. Anytime you put a filter on, you are using a form of augmented reality. This one at the bottom, you see where the man is holding a picture of, holding his phone to view a picture of a chair on his rug. This is actually a photo of a demonstration of the Home Depot app. So he is holding his phone in his room to see what it would look like if he purchased that chair and what it would look like in that space. And then you see it over here on the right-hand side of the screen where this is using it. It would, if you point it at this danger sign, it would actually translate it in real time for you. And then Pokemon Go. I think this is a little bit outdated, but I know that when Pokemon Go came out, it was the ultimate form of augmented reality, and people were just losing their minds because these Pokemon were all over the community and in tandem with the real world, and it was like they could see them when they were looking through their phones. So these are all examples, real world examples of augmented reality. But what's important to understand about augmented reality, I'm sure you've heard about virtual reality. Virtual reality, you are immersed within an alternate reality. All right, so you become part of that reality. Augmented reality, it overlays digital content with the real world. So that is how you are able to apply those filters, but also see your face or also see your room in the background. So it's a little bit different from virtual reality. But like I said, this is an emerging technology. It is relatively new, especially in the education field, but it's been used in medicine, manufacturing, robotics, entertainment, and tourism, and also in social networking, excuse me. There are two types of augmented reality. There's marker-based augmented reality. Some examples of this would be like Pokemon Go, where you're pointing your phone at something I'm sorry, not Pokemon Go, that's a marker list, I'm sorry. But like Snapchat, you're pointing your screen at your face, and that's serving as a trigger to activate the filter or to activate the graphic that's going to overlay across your face. Markerless augmented reality would be like Pokemon Go. All right. It's triggered by like a GPS coordinate. I can remember seeing a news report when that game came out and people were driving all over their communities, and it was actually coordinated with the GPS systems in their phone. And that's how they were able to locate the Pokemon. So those are the two types of augmented reality. But what's so great about using this sort of technology for people with intellectual disabilities is that it aligns with UDL, aligns with the Universal Design for Learning. It addresses accessibility and engagement. Research shows that use of this type of intervention is effective for teaching functional skills, vocational skills. It's been used to teach college students in a transition program how to navigate campus and increase their independence and participation on a college campus, and also their engagement and participation in leisure activities. Like video modeling, they can control their own learning. They can have ultimate control over how and when they access this sort of technology. So, it's been really great with the development of technology, such as smartwatches, iPhones, any sort of device that students are using and are familiar with. And let's be honest, a lot of times I'll walk into a classroom of, a self-contained classroom of students who have pretty significant needs, and they might not be able to do some of the academic work we're asking them to do, but they can find whatever YouTube video, whatever app they want on whatever device it is they're using. So they're familiar with this technology. So what I'm going to show you now are some examples of what this technology looks like when we were piloting this dissertation study. Oops, excuse me. I hit play too soon. This to set up what you're about to see. This is a video of students in a college-based transition program learning daily living skills using augmented reality. Now, I do have a disclaimer, and this is very unfortunate, that the app used in this study and in these videos, it no longer exists. It's very disappointing, especially from someone who uses it in their research. But if you look over here on the screen where the student's pointing the iPad, where it says making the bed, this is actually what we call like a trigger or a target. And think of it like a QR code. This target is going to activate a video model on the student's screen. And the student on the left is learning how to make his bed. The student in the video is learning how to set his alarm. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and play this video, but I just had to set it up for you. It's time to set the alarm. Okay, Brandon, now it's your turn.
Well,
Set the alarm for the time you wake up in the morning.
got it.
Okay, I want you to create a new alarm for the time that you wake up in the morning.
Okay.
Very good, Brandon.
Got it.
Good job. Okay, thank you. All right, so this is just one example of how we use this. And like I said, I'm not going to go heavy into the research. If you look at baseline before the student received any intervention, which was access to those video models through the augmented reality app, he had some skills, but it wasn't consistent. But upon introducing this line right here, upon introducing the intervention, you see that immediate improvement, and it stayed pretty steady. I guess I shouldn't say it stayed pretty steady. It varied a little bit, but he did maintain a much higher level of mastery and was able to maintain that after fading the intervention out. So this was a really successful intervention for this young man. This is another example I'm going to look at, or that we're going to look at. This is a young lady using the same app to teach her how to iron clothing. And you saw in the first one, the young man was using his iPad. This girl is using her cell phone. And just to reiterate, this is a transition program on a college campus. So the students in this video are actually living in a dorm at the University of Alabama. And in the dorm, you know, it's not just students with intellectual disabilities. There are also students in there living in the dorm with them who are part of early college, who are there to attend regular classes. So they are really immersed in the college culture. So let's watch this video.
Okay, Megan.
And we won't watch all of it.
Elizabeth Stewart. Yes, I know.
Ironing clothes. When ironing clothes, first find your iron and ironing board. Set up your ironing board. Plug iron into the wall. Set the iron to the appropriate temperature. Slide your shirt onto the ironing board, making sure the clothing is straight. Iron using back and forth motions. When needed, move clothing by rotating around the board.
Okay, Megan.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to restart that. So I just wanted to point out some things there. Like I said, this was in a college dorm. This ironing board was in kind of a central location for all of the students participating in this program because it was the only one that we had. And then you saw the target on the wall over there. All of the students had that application on their phone and could access those video models. Once we completed the study, they could access those video models. And we had them all throughout. So, you know, if there were certain skills we were trying to teach them to build that independence so they wouldn't have to rely on the staff working with them to teach them that skill every time or to correct them with that skill every time. They saw that target over there. They knew that symbol meant that that was going to be a video model. They could walk over with their phones or their iPads to access that instruction anytime. All right, so this is her data. You see baseline, she, maintained stability there, but there was definitely improvement once that intervention was introduced. We did not get any fading or maintenance data for her. We didn't have time to at the point we were at the study. This is my favorite use of this technology because this was actually in the community. This was using iPads to teach to teach purchasing. This was my dissertation research. And this young man is using his iPad. Rather than having the target be a QR code or a marker on the wall, the actual target is actually the debit card machine. So what he's learning how to do in this video is how to use the debit card machine. And rather than having a QR code or something, obviously there to provide the support, it's actually aligned and the video model is triggered by that debit card machine. And I'm going to check the snap right here, or the chat right here. Reminds me of using a listening device while going through a museum exhibit. Yeah, it's very similar. Okay, let's pay for our stuff. Watch the video. Good job. All right. Good.
Insert cash or select Pin. Use pin pad to complete transaction.
There you go. Look at your card. There you go. Oh, when you inserted it wrong. There you go. Now you're good.
No.
You did it. Very good.
Okay.
Yes. All right, so some things that are different with that video model. Like I said, the trigger for the video model is actually the debit card machine itself. It was individualized for this specific store. And the model, rather than using a video model, I should say, the video modeling was point of view modeling. So he actually was watching a video of what it would look like as if he were doing it himself. Oop. Really wants me to show you that twice. So over here, these are two different sets of data, but the squares represent paying for his items using the debit card. And you can see he had no independence before introducing this intervention. He was not able to complete any of the skills independently. And it was really disheartening because he was learning to purchase things. And when he didn't purchase them, then he just didn't get them. So he was highly motivated to purchase what it was. And usually it was something, sugary and terrible for you, to learn how to do this. So once we introduced that video modeling intervention with augmented reality, he made immediate improvement and was able to master and maintain that skill. These are all the participants' data. I taught them how to withdraw money from their ATM using the same intervention. And rather than having a marker like what you saw in the first two videos, their ATM was the trigger for their video model. So, in the beginning, I talked about how this can be customized, how it could be individualized. Let's close out of that. How it could be individualized. That's how you individualize it. Community-based instruction is so important for teaching functional skills within that authentic environment. It's really ideal for generalizations. So you can see, looking at the data points here, that this was a very successful intervention for teaching both using ATM and purchasing using a debit card. And for the two that were able to participate in the maintenance trials, which this was just before COVID hit in 2019, they were able to maintain those skills. All right, so how can you use this in your own classroom? How can you use this with your own students? The very first thing you have to do is consider the teaching environment. Are you going to teach this in the community as part of your community-based instruction? Many schools and many systems are very fortunate to provide that and really emphasize CBI and know the need for it. But there are more rural schools or schools that don't have the resources or the manpower to provide community-based instruction. So you have to use, you would have to use this intervention in a simulated environment. So you would have to create it yourself. So you've got to consider where you're going to use it. Research supports the use of community-based instruction within the natural environment. Like I said, it increases generalization. One of the main benefits for CBI is that it allows the educator or the person doing the teaching to see and control for the challenges. I said one of the benefits, some of the challenges of using CBI is that the instructor is not able to control for these unforeseen things that happen in the community. So to give you an example, one of the girls that I used as a participant in my study, I didn't show her video, but one day she went to make a purchase using her debit card, and she got up to the counter, went to pay for her stuff and realized she had lost her debit card. So the trial ended there. She absolutely had to come apart, was not able to recover from that. She could not find her debit card, could not pay for her items. So there was some additional instruction that had to take place there. I had to come out and talk her through that situation, but those are the things you're not going to be able to control for. If you're working with students in the community, all sorts of crazy things happen. That same student that you saw, I think either the time before that or the time after that, we were doing a trial. I was recording and a man was in the background being arrested. So if you're using community-based instruction and you're actually in a store, you're somewhere in the community, you have no control over what's going on around you. You could probably tell from that video that the noise level, there was a lot of background noise. It was difficult to hear the video on the recording, but the student was able to hear it. But that might be something you want to consider, is if where you're going and you're going to implement this sort of intervention, if it's very noisy, if it's very distracting, because we know our students can be easily distracted, that might not be the ideal place to teach this sort of intervention. And then always you have to consider the availability of your resources and whether students are going to have access to certain materials. Specifically with teaching banking and purchasing, a school system is likely not going to allow that because we had to access the students' bank accounts. The parents had to set up bank accounts, provide them with a debit card in order for them to participate in the study. And there was a ton of hoops I had to jump through in order to get permission from the institution review board for them to do that. A school system is probably not going to want that level of liability. So, you might not have access to some of those things, depending on what it is that you're trying to teach. And like I said, with the example of the student who lost her debit card, if you're using community-based instruction, there might be things that you have to teach in conjunction to the actual skills themselves. You're using technology for this augmented reality intervention, and we know technology is not reliable. There's a ton of glitches that are going to happen, and you can sometimes anticipate those, but sometimes you can't, like if the Wi-Fi goes out or if their device isn't charged. Those are things you kind of have to work through with the student, and there has to be some side instruction that takes place there. Another one is asking or knowing who to ask if they need assistance. So you've done all this really great instruction in the community. The student is able to use this sort of technology independently, but what if something happens to the debit card machine and they don't know what to do? If it's not reading their card or they have to start over, if we've taught them to be independent with this app and purchasing or with this intervention when purchasing, but we haven't taught them, okay, if it doesn't work, you need to find someone in a blue vest, then they're just going to stand there. So, working in natural environments definitely has a ton of benefits, but there are also a lot of challenges to overcome. So a lot of times working within simulated environments is more ideal. And I would definitely recommend this if you are a teacher and you are starting to use this sort of intervention, because there are so many glitches with technology and there are so many challenges that can't be controlled or that you can't control when working in the community. One of the most important benefits of simulated instruction using augmented reality is that it is very cost and time effective. it takes manpower, it takes time, it takes resources to go out in the community. And a lot of schools just don't have that. So, set up an environment that approximates that natural environment. If you have, a shelf in your classroom, can you turn it into a grocery store shelf and use this sort of intervention to teach stocking? Or if you have some sort of coffee cart or school-based cafe, can you teach students to set up and start coffee using this sort of intervention within the school setting, so that, say, down the road, they go and apply for a job at an actual coffee shop like a Starbucks. You've taught the skills using this sort of technology and this type of intervention, but it's within the context of the school and not the natural environment. And I think in addition to just being time and cost effective, you can troubleshoot some of the problems you're going to come up with, either with technology or with just instruction in general. So, start with the simulated instruction and then move to community-based instruction. That's going to be your best approach. All right, next you got to consider your learners. What are their needs? What are their preferences? You saw the students in the first couple of videos, they had video modeling of others. So there was another graduate assistant serving as the video model, and they were watching her perform those skills, whereas the student in the last video had point of view modeling. So, it's just going to take trial and error, data collection to figure out what is best for your students, what can help them be most successful. You have to consider what type of device is most appropriate. In the first study, the pilot study, the students were using iPads. In the dissertation study, what you saw second, well, I guess that one student was using an iPad, but two of the other students wanted to use their cell phones. All right. These apps are accessible on multiple devices. So whatever it is that you choose to use, you want to make sure it aligns with what the student has access to, or what the school can provide. And I think what's really important too is to consider what's going to be most practical for the student after transition. So if they're going to use this sort of technology after they graduate, they're probably not going to be carrying an iPad around. If you can teach it on a smaller device, if you can set it up on their phones, that would obviously be ideal. In the video that you saw of the student setting his alarm, I love this student because it was a very dramatic thing, and we ended up having to make some accommodations for him. He was holding his iPad up to the wall beside where he charges his phone, and it was just an act of Congress to get him to hold that iPad up for that long. We talk about his muscles were spasming and his arms were so sore from the day before because he had to hold his iPad up for a minute and a half. Poor thing. But we ended up moving that target actually to the desk, taping it to the desk beside his phone. So he was able to hold the phone pointed down. So those are just some of the preferences and things you want to take into consideration when you're designing any sort of intervention using this sort of technology. And then you want to determine the skill, the target, and the equipment needed. We have used this technology with multiple skills across multiple domains of transition. So to give you some examples of the way we use this technology with job skills, we had a student working a job site in a restaurant, and one of his duties was to clean the windows. Well, there were multiple bottles of cleaner back in the room where they kept all of those cleaning supplies, and they were very similar. All right, it wasn't like Windex and Comet. All right, they were all in just generic bottles and different colors. The student would point his device to whatever bottle it was he was looking at, and it would show him what it was that he needed to use that device for. So it wasn't a video model. If you pointed it at the blue bottle, it would bring up a picture of windows, of someone washing windows. If you pointed it at the green bottle, it would bring up a picture of somebody disinfecting tables. So that is how he was able to differentiate between those different cleaners. I gave you the example of already for setting up coffee, like if you were working on job skills for a barista type job, using a video model where a student has to point their device at the coffee maker. And again, you can personalize this. It could be generic, or it could be the coffee maker you're actually using in the classroom, or in the job setting, and you're teaching the student how to do that using that actual coffee maker. We've also used it for janitorial, domestic skills, different pieces of equipment in the home or that they're going to see in the job, like a mop or a broom or a vacuum, pointing it at those different items, and it provides a video model for how they can use it more independently. One of my favorite ways we've used this, and one of the most, I think, fun skills to work on is cooking. We had a QR word wall in the classroom where we first started using this technology. So we were working on reading, and again, these are students with significant disabilities. We were working on reading functional cooking words. So saute, bake, I'm trying to think of other ones, mash, scramble, fry, different words they would see in the context of actual recipes. But saute, you say that to someone and they don't have any context for what that means. So they would scan the QR code right beside it, and that would show them a video model of someone sauteing something, or of the eggs. It would show someone scrambling the eggs. We have also used it in academics. So if you're teaching specific skills and you're working with your small group and you're doing some direct instruction, but you've got some students over here doing independent work, one way to provide some additional support for those doing independent work is to set up like either a word wall or QR codes that provide a video model of you reteaching that skill or providing more instruction for using that skill. So there are a number of different ways that you can use this sort of technology. You've got to consider the target. Is it going to be a QR code? Is it going to be a word? And then also the equipment needed. And sometimes that goes along with the equipment that you have available. So once you've determined all that, then you can task analyze, and you want to be really specific because, for the context of the study, we were working with students with significant or mild significant intellectual disabilities. But your learners best. You might not have to pick apart every single skill, but you definitely want to be thorough enough so that they can achieve whatever the desired outcome is. If that student didn't perform every step in purchasing those items using his debit card, he wasn't going to get a Mountain Dew and a Snickers, and that is very rewarding for anybody. So, we had to be really specific when we were designing our video models so that we taught every single step that needed to be covered so that the student could be successful. And again, I'm looking at the ATM one. If you miss a step using the ATM, you don't get your cash. And we all know how motivating cash is. So you want to be specific in those task analyses. All right. And like anything, and like with anything in any intervention you're using, you have got to collect data to determine whether or not changes need to be made to your intervention and how successful your students are with using this intervention. It also helps when determining what sorts of prompts will be delivered, when you're establishing what sorts of prompts will be delivered. For the purposes of the studies you saw, we used least to most prompting. So that helped with our data collection and making sure that we were, for the first study, we had some other graduate assistants working on collecting the data, and it was consistent across the board. You might be using paraprofessionals, you might be using other teachers to work on these skills. So you just want to be consistent with how it is that you're collecting data. All right. Then you want to teach the student to use the AR application. And you want to do that really outside of the skill that it is that you're teaching directly. So here you see a task analysis of how I taught the students to use HP Reveal. There was some direct instruction, and that was the app you saw in the video that no longer exists. Rest in peace. I miss it so much. In the video, you saw the students just open it up and use it. But there were some trial sessions that took place beforehand with unrelated skills, things that were generic, like wiping windows or taking out the trash. But the purpose of those training sessions were to teach the student how to use HP Reveal. So, we did some data collection to make sure they were independent with using the technology before we actually took it out into the community. And that's going to be very important because, in Walmart, if that's where you are and you're using this sort of technology and the student's not proficient with the technology, we all know how cranky people can get behind us in line at Walmart. So you want to make sure they're really proficient with using that technology. Whatever device or whatever application it is that you're using, you want to have sufficient evidence that they can use that independently. All right. And then modeling using that application. So let's say you've taught them to use the application within the classroom. You've taught them how to navigate that application to get to what it is they need to access the video model. You want to go back when you get into the community and actually model using it within that context. So that was the very first thing that I did with my participants when they were starting a new skill in the community, whether it was purchasing or using the ATM. That very first session, I walked through how to use that app with the ATM. All right, because what they were practicing in the classroom setting was using that app with a QR code, or using that app with like a trash can, because that was the skill that we used to teach them to use the app. Well, you've got to show them where to hold that device, where to point it so that it would activate that video model. And that's going to be really important that the students understand and can position that device so that the video model appears. And again, that's really specific to that application. But even with QR codes, if you're scanning something and a video model appears and you come off of it, all right, it could shut down that app entirely. It could take away that video model. So you're just showing them how to use it in different environments. All right, so Thyng, Metaverse, Augment, Beaconstac, these are all different examples of augmented reality applications that are free, that you can play with so that you can find what works for you in whatever skill or activity it is that you're wanting to teach. Again, the app that was used in the study and that was used in the videos was ideal because you could upload videos however long you needed to, but with some of these, you only have a time limit on the videos that you're trying to upload. So take that into consideration. Some alternatives to using video modeling. Sometimes students with more severe disabilities and more significant needs might need it broken down even more. So rather than watching a really long video of someone demonstrating a task, maybe you have a task analysis with QR codes beside each step. All right, maybe they can do the first two independently, but they get to the next step and they don't remember how to do that. They can point it at this QR code. It'll trigger a video model or it'll trigger an example of what it is they need to do next. So, you can really individualize it however you need for your students. And QR codes are a really fun way to do that. The students are find that very engaging and find it very enjoyable, whether it's on an iPad, a tablet, or a cell phone. But my studies really contribute to this idea that AR is going to be a very effective intervention for teaching numerous skills to people with intellectual disabilities. I'm not the only person studying this. There's a lot of support in the research that shows this is very effective, and there are a ton of benefits to using it. Speaking back to what we said earlier about universal design for learning, this is a very accessible intervention. Students are very proficient with technology most of the time. Majority of them, especially when you're talking about transition age students, probably have access to some sort of device. So it is very accessible. It's very portable. If you're using a cell phone, that's something that stays in their pocket or stays in their purse. It can be used anywhere. It can be carried at any time. They can whip it out. They can control the pace and the frequency with which they're viewing those video models or those visuals to help support them and be more independent. And for you teachers, it's very cost and time efficient. I will say playing with those apps and really making sure it's doing what it is that you want it to do, that can take some time on the front end. But once you're comfortable with it, some of those video models were made in 10 minutes. And again, the apps were free. So it's very cost and time efficient. You can put it on one device and they can access it from other devices because whatever the content is that you're trying to teach them aligns with that QR code. So you can teach it on an iPad at school, but have it on their iPhones at home, and it will work either way. I think what's really great and what's especially important when you're talking about transition age individuals is any type of intervention, any type of supports they're going to need in a community setting, especially for these functional skills. Their peers are out there doing these things already. They're out there working independently. They're shopping and paying for the items they need. Sometimes there is that stigma that goes along with someone in the community who needs additional support, and they're having to get it from their parent or from their teacher. All right. This is a very socially valid intervention, and that studies, and including mine, that have looked at the social validity of using this sort of technology, the participants all agree that they're not embarrassed to use this, that they feel like this is something that can help them, that it's easy to use, and that they enjoyed using it, but saw the value in using it. So I think that is a very critical component to consider when determining what interventions you're going to use with your students, especially in any sort of community-based setting, because there are peers there, and they want to be like their peers a lot of times, but also there are a lot of barriers. So in my experience and in my role here, within these school systems, I come in contact with teachers who they're just not really knowledgeable about technology. Augmented reality is relatively new. And even if they are using it for like Facebook and Snapchat, they don't realize that's what it is. Or maybe they don't realize that it can serve other purposes. So that lack of knowledge really serves as a barrier if teachers don't understand how this sort of intervention can be helpful. And then, as always, we're talking about education. So the lack of resources is going to be a huge barrier. Rural schools who are, high poverty, students with very limited access to technology, they're not going to be able to benefit from this type of instruction. So when you're designing your instruction and you're implementing your teaching, if they don't have access to these devices at home, if it's not practical for them outside of the school setting and they can't access it there, do you want to teach it in your classroom? I mean, you could teach it to mastery, I guess, but the whole idea is for students with mild or significant disabilities, if they're going to need that ongoing support, they can have access to it when they need it. So something you want to consider. It is a barrier, but there are ways around it. But it just might not be an intervention or a strategy for everybody. All right, and then you've got the students who just aren't proficient with technology. I can think of one that I worked with that it took much longer than the others to teach them how to use this app. And then I had another one who had some fine motor deficits that would cause him to kind of click out of the screen, like his thumb would twitch and it would shoot the screen over and we'd have to go back in. So we had to work around that. But if your students aren't proficient with technology, you really want to make sure you're providing that instruction on the front end. And this is the biggest one here because I experienced this. Imagine a graduate student preparing for and has proposed her dissertation research and is getting ready for that next step in completing her PhD, and you get an email from the company that runs the app you're going to use for your research, and they say they're shutting down. It was a very tearful night, but I did realize that I still have access to the app. They didn't shut it down entirely, but you can't download it anymore. I was able to get around that, but technology is always changing. It's not reliable by any means. These apps, they come and they go. They change and they have to be updated frequently. So if you're using this as an instructional tool, you have to take that into consideration and you have to make sure you're staying on top of it so that you don't end up in situations like me. So I think we talked about that first bullet there. Some considerations is understanding the technology you need and the reliability of augmented reality apps. They are not reliable. You cannot depend on them. You have got to stay ahead of the game on that. Number of steps for completing the task is going to be a very important consideration. You have students with diverse needs. You've got students that can watch a 2-minute video, retain that information, and then go perform that skill. But then you also have students that are going to need it broken down into more discrete steps. So it might not be ideal for every student to be presented with a video model that's very long. And it might not be, appropriate for some students to be presented in that method at all. So you just got to consider that when you are designing this sort of instruction. And then also social validity, like I said, is going to be really important. The participants in the study, and primarily who I've worked with using this intervention, are all transition age. They need that. They're transition age, so they're eager to be independent. They're eager to be employed, to be in their community, but they're going to need that ongoing support. So whether you're using a AR app, whether you're using video modeling, just make sure however you're presenting it and however you're teaching them to use it is in a socially valid way, that their peers are not going to discriminate or have anything to say against it. Being on a college campus for some of the research that we did was really great, because what are college students doing? They're looking at their phones. They never look up. They have no idea what's going on in the world around them. So it was nothing for my students to be in the community and whip out their phone to watch a video model, because everybody else is looking at their phone too. So you just got to take those things into consideration. I think that's all I have as far as talking about augmented reality. You can see the full study by scanning the QR code. And I think we'll push out this presentation. If you need these handouts, I can email them to SWAC so they can get it to you. But I do have my contact information on here. I've got my email address. If you have any questions or any ideas and want to just share how you're implementing this sort of intervention in your own setting, I am so excited to hear it. I have not seen a lot of teachers that I haven't worked with directly using this, again, because it's so new. So, please reach out to me if you're using it in a new way, or if you're just excited about it because your students are really excited about it. I love to hear those touchy-feely stories. And like I said, I appreciate your time and your interest in this. I'm going to open up the chat to see if there's anything in there. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. I think we've got a little bit longer. If you've got any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can unmute, either one.
Hi, Shannon. I was wondering if, I know you shared those apps, the QR scanner, so I'll check them all out. But one of the things I'm using my camera for scanning the QR code is there's that extra step of touching the link when it comes up. Are there any QR code readers that it automatically opens the video without that extra step?
Not that I have found, unfortunately. But again, if you are using QR codes in your instruction, the first thing you want to make sure you're doing is teaching how to use that technology explicitly. So if that's going to be an extra step, and let's say you're using a task analysis to teach them how to use a QR code, that's going to be something you want to put in there.
Okay. And I just noticed in Google Chrome, if you go into the address bar, there's actually a QR code generator right in there in Chrome, which I never knew was there.
Yes, and qrcode.com. I mean, you can Google a ton of free resources. A way that I've gotten around I like to make my own video models because I can never find exactly what I need. But sometimes I'm in a hurry if there's like a skill I know I'm going to teach and I don't have time to make a video model. So I'm searching YouTube for it. I find my video, I connect it to a QR code on any free website, and it's ready in 5 minutes. So yes, that is a good point to bring up, is there is a QR generator in your Google search bar now. So I think that's a relatively new feature too.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Anybody familiar with this sort of technology and have used it in their instruction? Well, again, I think this, can be adapted for whatever grade level, for whatever, population you serve and whatever context you serve. It could be in special education, but it can also be in the general education setting. I think this is a really easy and reasonable accommodation to include in a classroom. If you can't provide any additional support, then, we'll teach the student how to use this if they need reteaching or if they need additional instruction. So they don't have to go ask that general education teacher over and over again when you're not in there. Is there a list of apps that we can make these things like drag and drop UI? I do not know. I'm not familiar. Is drag and drop UI a specific app? I'm not familiar with it. If it is, this is the list of apps that I find to be most beneficial for developing any sort of AR instruction or activities. This Thyng, Metaverse, Augment, and Beaconstac. And I'm constantly looking for new ones. And I secretly hope deep down in my heart that HP Reveal is going to resurface, because that has been my go-to. That is my favorite one that I have ever used. And they said very unpromisingly, I don't even know if that's a word, that they would emerge again one day, but that was a year ago. So I'm not holding my breath. All right. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I appreciate you guys taking time to learn about this, and look forward and hope that you will send me an email for how you've used it in your own classroom. I feel like there's only a handful of people who really use this sort of technology and take advantage of it. So, I'm always looking to make connections. And if you're going to be at CEC this year in Orlando, I will also be there presenting on this. So thank you so much. You guys have been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for your time. Everyone, you will receive an email with a link to a feedback survey. Once you complete that, you'll receive your certificate automatically. And let us know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.